Welcome back to the Thinking Jew podcast, where we dive deep into Torah and Jewish philosophy, always uncovering new depths that we did not realize that were there beforehand. I'm your host, Rabbi Yosef Segal, and as always, if you want to reach me for anything, comments, questions, feedback, I can be reached at thethinkingjewpodcast@gmail.com. I want to dedicate this episode to my good old friend, not related to me, Yosef Segal, for always encouraging me to make more of these podcasts. And the fact that this podcast exists today is definitely in his merit. Thank you, Yosef. It should be a merit for you and your beautiful family. In this week's Torah portion, the Parsha of Truma, it primarily discusses the obligation to build the Tabernacle, or as it's known in Hebrew, the Mishkan, and all of the vessels that were inside of it. I want to discuss today what exactly was the role of the Tabernacle, the bigger picture. Why does the discussion of the construction of it take up the entire second half of the book of Exodus? Basically, the function and purpose of the tabernacle. So I think a crucial starting point is really in the beginning of this week's Parsha. And God commands the Jews to build the Mishkan, and God explicitly says its purpose. This is in Exodus chapter 25, verse 8. The Torah says, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socham, which literally means, and you shall build for me a sanctified place, and I will dwell inside you. And the commentaries all point out that it doesn't say God will dwell inside that sanctified place. Rather, it says, build me a sanctified place so that I may dwell inside of you, inside of the Jewish nation. So we see clearly that the primary dwelling place of God is inside the heart and mind of every Jewish person, of every Jewish household. And somehow the tabernacle facilitates that reality happening. That ability for God to enter the inside of each person and each family unit comes about through the tabernacle. So let's look at exactly how that goes about and how that happens. Let's give a 30-second rundown of human history up to this moment. God creates Adam in the Garden of Eden. Adam sins in the Garden of Eden, messes up, and after him the generations continue to fail, going lower and lower, further and further from God. God's sitting there waiting for a nation, for a man, for a person to step up and accept Adam's mission in the world. Abraham is the first one to step up and says, I accept it on myself for me and my family going forward. God tests Abraham, then he tests his son Isaac, then he tests his son Jacob. They pass the test, the Jewish nation is accepted, and to prepare for this mission, they're purified through the difficult slavery in Egypt. They emerge as this nation ready to accept their divine purpose and get back to that relationship that Adam initially had with God in the Garden of Eden, that extremely deep connection to Hashem. They leave Egypt and they get to Mount Sinai. And like we discussed 2 weeks ago, at the foot of that mountain, the greatest thing happened. It wasn't that we got the Torah, but rather we entered into this relationship. We entered into this covenant with God, where each side, the Jewish nation and Hashem, both committed themselves to the other side. They then went ahead and experienced God after this commitment with the Sinai experience, 10 Commandments, in the most deep and real way. They saw, they felt, they heard, they experienced God in this deep synesthetic way, as we explained a few weeks ago, and then they returned to reality to go live that mission. And the question is, how are they possibly going to be able to keep up this level? How could they retain that closeness to God and carry it with them in their lives going forward? Right after the Torah is given, God commands the Jews, and he says, build for me a tabernacle. V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. Build for me this sanctified place so I can dwell in you. What's the point of this place? It's to carry on that Mount Sinai experience. That whenever you fall and you forget how close we became, you can go to the tabernacle. You have a place you can go to reconnect, to re-experience that deep Sinaic experience all over again. The goal of the tabernacle and eventually the temple was to really create a transportable Mount Sinai so that God can continue this deep relationship that him and the Jewish people both committed towards each other. And the Ramban, Nachmanides, explains that this is the reason why the whole second half of the book of Exodus discusses the construction of the temple and the various vestments worn by the Kohanim inside of the temple, the priests in the temple. Nachmanides says that the book of Shemos, the book of Exodus, is called the book of redemption. And the redemption was only complete once God was able to completely connect and remain connected to the Jewish nation. So once we had that Sinai experience and then had a way to continue it and to keep connecting to Hashem, that's the completion of the redemption. Nachmanides actually goes forward and draws multiple parallels between the Sinai experience and the tabernacle itself. Perhaps the greatest example he gives is it says in Exodus 24:16 that the glory of Hashem rested on Mount Sinai, and it uses almost the exact same phraseology in Exodus 40 verse 34 when it says the glory of Hashem filled the Mishkan. The kavod Hashem, it was that same kavod Hashem, that same glory of God, says Nachmanides, that came down on Mount Sinai, that connected to the Jewish nation, that forged that relationship. That same glory was moved over from Mount Sinai into the tabernacle to carry on that relationship with the Jewish people. So we see that the tabernacle was much more than just a house of God, or much more than just a place to go and experience spirituality. Rather, it was a living memento of the Sinai experience. And when a Jew would enter it, he would relive that experience. And he could then take that back home with him, allowing Hashem to reside not just in a specific place in the Jewish nation, but inside each and every Jew, himself or herself. And I think a question that a lot of people can have today is, what are we supposed to do? We don't have that tabernacle anymore. We don't have that memento to look at and remind ourselves of that deep relationship. So what can we do? And the answer is that we actually do have that. If you look in Exodus, in both chapter 31 and chapter 35, you'll find that in both places, when the Torah is describing the building of the tabernacle, the building of the Mishkan, it adds in a concept that seems to be out of place. In both places, it adds in the obligation to keep Shabbos. 6 days a week you work, and on Shabbos you rest. And the Talmud explains this apparent anomaly by saying that although the tabernacle was of utmost importance, it doesn't override the laws of Shabbos, and the Jews were forbidden from building the tabernacle on Shabbos. And the deeper sources explain that it's not just that building the tabernacle didn't override Shabbos, but it's really much more fundamental than that. It's actually that which the tabernacle expressed and brought into the world is already present in the world on Shabbos. Says Rav Tzadok, the same memento that exists in the dimension of space through the tabernacle, that ability to connect very deeply and intimately with God through the dimension of space when you enter into the tabernacle, exists in the exact same way in the dimension of time on Shabbos. So it's not just that you're prohibited from building the tabernacle on Shabbos, rather it's that you already have the tabernacle present. It's already built on Shabbos. And I once heard a beautiful addition to this, I believe it was from Rabbi Yechezkel Weinfeld of Yerushalayim, that we say during the traditional Friday night songs, there's a song called Kol Mekadesh Shvi'i, all those who sanctify the seventh day. And there's a verse in that song that says as follows, Ohave Hashem HaMechakim Levinyan Ariel, B'yom HaShabbos Kodesh, Sisu V'simchu Ki Mekable Matan Nachliel, which literally means, the lovers of God that await the building of the temple are joyous and celebrate on Shabbos like the giving of the Torah. In other words, those that are awaiting the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, those that are longing for this deep ability to connect to Hashem, they are joyous and happy on Shabbos like the day they got the Torah. Just like on the day they got the Torah, they had this deep relationship. And they yearn for the temple, they yearn for that tabernacle in order to continue on and experience that relationship. Those people that really want that, they're happy and joyous on Shabbos. Because on Shabbos itself, we're able to tap into that same energy. We're able to connect to that same deep, profound relationship and experience the equivalent of entering the temple through our observance of the holy day of Shabbos. I'll just end with giving us all a bracha, a blessing that we should all merit through the observance of the holiest day of Shabbos to see the rebuilding of the third temple and be able to experience this profound relationship with God, not only in the dimension of time, but also in the dimension of space. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Thinking Jew podcast. As always, if you want to reach out to me with any questions or topic requests, I can be reached at thethinkingjewpodcast@gmail.com. Wishing everybody a healthy, safe, awesome Shabbos.